Yes, we do. Thanks, Brandy. Week one of the George Zimmerman murder trial wrapped up yesterday afternoon. Zimmerman is being charged and tried now for second-degree murder in the death of 17-year-old Trayvon Martin, the Florida teenager who was killed by Zimmerman. A number of witnesses took the stand this week, and many are still talking about the dramatic and sometimes contentious debate between the prosecution's star witness and the defense team. Joining us this morning is legal analyst Sezen Oygar. She's here to give us a wrap of this week's testimony. The first week of the proceedings began with opening arguments that some consider downright bizarre, certainly irregular. Talk about what the prosecution was trying to establish and what the defense was trying to establish in their opening arguments.
What a week it was.
Yes, it was, huh?
Yeah, we had knock-knock jokes, and we started with the prosecution with an F-bomb, believe it or not.
Right.
The prosecution did a tremendous job with their opening statements.
Why do you say that?
John Guy, first off, John Guy was kind of on the sidelines. We hadn't really seen too much of him pre-trial. And then all of a sudden they send in the second-string quarterback to, take the game away. And he did a phenomenal job. He started out this first thing with putting state of mind into issue, saying George Zimmerman is racial profiling. He had racial intent. He had the ill will, the hatred by calling Trayvon a punk and dropping, profanities. That was tremendous. They really took that image of George Zimmerman being essentially a racist and compared that to Trayvon as a child with just Skittles and iced tea and was talking to a girl as he was walking home, just as teenagers do. Hugely effective. For the defense, ooh la la, Don West, I think his intentions were good, but...
That's a nervous laugh that I'm giving it.
Yeah.
And that's more than he got in the courtroom, wasn't it? With his knock-knock joke. What was he trying to pull off?
I think he had just gotten an objection that he didn't, he was unsuccessful. I think he was thrown off a little bit in court. Sometimes humor can work well with jurors. It's fine balance. Sometimes I've been able to have a joke and it works well with the jury, but other times you have to gauge it. And I think this is a murder trial. You have Trayvon's parents who are sitting right next to the jury, essentially. It was painful and inappropriate.
Did he insult jurors with his knock-knock joke? Knock-knock, who's there?
I don't know if he insulted jurors, but
Trayvon who? Zimmerman who?
Right.
I don't know anything, so I'm a juror.
Right. I think when you go from how, John Guy's opening statement, which was emotional, fast, and furious, to this slow, drawn-out process that Don West gave, it was such a clear, they were so different, and I think that the jury, I don't know if they were offended necessarily, but it was just inappropriate. It wasn't the right time.
So we hate to think it, but style matters in a situation like this?
Absolutely.
Oh, you'd know better than anybody.
It does.
Yeah, you're a litigator.
It's just, it matters, how the jurors are going to respond, and I think John Guy 100% took the opening statements.
Yeah, you talked about how the prosecution tried to frame this argument of racial profiling, and that's the reason all of America is watching this case, because it appears to be a case where at least the defendant is accused of racially profiling his victim. How important is it to establish that there was racial profiling going on? And then I'm going to ask you about maybe some racial profiling happening from the other side when we talk about this witness's testimony. But go ahead and address that first question.
Right. It's hugely important because one of the elements of second-degree murder is saying that the killing happened with a depraved mind. So having George Zimmerman being racially profiling Trayvon, that goes directly to the element of second-degree murder. So it's essentially one of the most important facets of the second-degree murder charge.
And with the testimony of the prosecution's so-called star witness, we hear that Trayvon might have been making some statements on the phone to her that seemed to be racially biased and maybe even aggressive. Talk about that.
Right. If the defense can establish that it really was Trayvon who put race into play, I think they win. 100%. I think they win, at least to the second-degree murder charge. If they portray Trayvon as actually he was the one who was throwing the racial slurs and it wasn't George Zimmerman, check for the defense.
Wow. Yeah. Can we say it on TV? You can. Well,
you're setting me up here.
I'd rather you say it because I want our audience at home who might have missed her testimony. If you're quoting her,
Right.
She claims she was talking to Trayvon, and he was claiming that he was being pursued by
a cracker, and there was a little extra word on the end of
some
that.
profanities.
But, right. So if you have, and Rachel Jantel said, "Oh, I don't consider that racial." What? Really? Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I think for most people, you're going to, take that, especially in Florida, in a southern community, you're going to take that as a racial slur.
If you're prosecuting this case, would you have called her?
I think you kind of have to as the prosecution,
right.
But they should have prepped her better. They should have carried her testimony, asked her more questions. I think what really fell flat for the prosecution was they set her up to be pretty much slayed by the defense. You can, whether you like Don West or whether you don't like Don West's style, it was drawn out, but he did, I think, a great job with her because he really went through and he discredited her. He was able to pull out lies. He was able to show that she, it kind of can work both ways, that she can't read, that she's uneducated, but that also totally plays into her credibility as a witness and her, oh, I'm just now giving you these points that I didn't bring up and that in my initial interviews, and I rushed through all my initial interviews because I just didn't care. She came across as cavalier and disrespectful.
So we've got the big picture pretty much, but there were some, let's call them irregularities, some abnormalities. There were some weirdnesses happening so far in this trial. Will you come back next hour and talk to us a little bit more about those?
I would love to, absolutely.
As we talk about this witness, she gave us some pretty bizarre moments so far.
She did.
All right. Sezen Oygar, legal analyst, thanks for joining us on Good Morning San Diego. We'll check back in with you next hour.